Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Advice Series webinar, Keeping Up with LinkedIn. The Career Advice Series is brought to you by the ABA Legal Career Central, a career center that offers both career development resources and a job board for law students, lawyers, and other legal professionals across all disciplines and career stages. Today's speaker is Katie White. Katie is principal of KT White Law Careers and Director of Employer Outreach at George Washington University Law School. Before joining GW Law and starting her own business, she worked at several major law firms in attorney recruiting and professional development. She's an experienced legal career advisor for both attorneys and law students on all facets of job search and career planning. Thank you for joining us today, Katie. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm really excited to have been invited by the ABA to do this talk today, and I wanted to welcome everyone. And before I start, I also wanted to thank those of you who sent your questions in advance. I always really appreciate getting an opportunity to hear a little bit from my potential audience, so I'm sure to direct the program to what you all are interested in hearing about. So, as this slide, our first slide says, I'm going to be addressing your questions, and I will stop periodically to see if we can answer some as they come up. So, we're going to talk about why use LinkedIn. Is it effective? We're going to be talking about your profile and summary and, your presence on LinkedIn, ideas for networking and how best to use LinkedIn to network and also post articles or ideas or photos. Using LinkedIn as a marketing tool to market yourself, branding yourself. You may have heard this term. And also ideas about job search and using LinkedIn for business development and other things like that. Next slide. There we go. Thanks. Okay, so this is a description of LinkedIn that I pulled from Wikipedia, updated a little bit, but I just like people to see a little bit more about, what is LinkedIn really, when was it formed, et cetera, and you'll see that now there's over 530 million users internationally, all over. And when LinkedIn was created in co-founder Reid Hoffman's living room in 2002, no one knew that it was going to, become such a great tool and so many people would be invested in using it. The mission of LinkedIn is to connect the world's professionals, and that is really what it does. So it's different than other social networking tools. LinkedIn has incorporated some, tools that you can use now, some, posting things, etc. But it's still meant to be totally professional, and this is a place, not like Facebook, but where you really are doing business. Next slide. So why use LinkedIn? What is the overall purpose? So we've talked a minute about that. Also, I get this question all the time. Should I upgrade to Premier? What are the difference between the different accounts? So as you may know, anyone can use LinkedIn now and there's no charge at all. If you do decide to upgrade, and I have a Premier account because I use it so heavily, what you get with that is, first of all, unlimited search capabilities. So if you're on there once in a while and just looking up colleagues or trying to do a little business, it's probably fine for you, but like me, I'm on there every day trying to connect people, etc. So that was important to me, the unlimited search. And then the other thing that you get is when you sign up for LinkedIn, you have to include, your email address as part of the subscription, and not all the contacts, but most of them have that email link. If you are a Premier member, then you can access that. So that's really helpful. Next slide. So I'd like to show this slide. It's very interesting. There was a report, and it was done a while ago in 2014, but I just think, some of the content is still pertinent, of course, today. And it's a report by the ALM Legal Intelligence and Zeughauser Group. And at any rate, they polled legal counsel, in-house counsel, to see how did they use LinkedIn. And as you can see, a large group of them, 60%, said they use it to connect with business and industry leaders. So then the next biggest group is connect with their in-house colleagues, people that they have hired, to do their legal work. The next category, connect with outside counsel with whom I work. And then as a platform to receive news and information. And my guess is this category has gone up over the years because there is more and more very valuable content, which we will be getting to, posted on LinkedIn. Many people are using it, and again, I'm sure it's even more today, to stay abreast of job opportunities. There's a whole jobs site on LinkedIn, and then to connect with outside counsel with whom they do not work. So that's great news to any of you who are trying to get hired by these companies. And then very few use it to share their own news and information. But again, I would say that that number is growing. Next slide. So in my view, all attorneys can benefit from using LinkedIn, not merely in-house counsel. You, again, could use it to connect with those in your industry, connect with colleagues that you already know. So for example, you worked with someone 10 years ago and you're just wondering, hey, what's so-and-so doing now? Most people will go to LinkedIn to update their information so that it's current. And so that's just a great way to keep in touch with people who you maybe haven't talked to in a long time. And now oh, they've moved here or moved there, and then you can connect. Obviously, it's a great way to connect with the people that you meet. So when you go to a networking event or you teach a class or whatever it is, going home and reaching out and saying, hey, let's connect, it's a really great way to keep track of your contacts and hopefully connect with them in the future should a networking reason arise. Platform to receive news and information. So companies and maybe businesses and all kinds of people now have pages on LinkedIn as well. And let's say you, for some reason, want to do business or maybe eventually be hired by the Coca-Cola Corporation. You can look up LinkedIn, on LinkedIn, Coca-Cola, and you can follow their page. And then you can receive information and updates and learn more about them. And also, when you go to their page, it'll show all the people that you are connected to who work at Coca-Cola. So there's a lot of very cool ways to get information from LinkedIn. Staying abreast of job opportunities. What I like about the jobs pages on LinkedIn is that they will sometimes, not always, but sometimes include the person who posted the job. And of course that can be super helpful because you could maybe email that person and say, I'm very excited to see this job opening. Can you tell me more about it or whatever? So it's just kind of an invitation to maybe do some networking. And then finally, as we've said, to share news, and we will get into posting and that kind of thing next. So now let's talk about creating an effective profile. And these are the questions that people had about this kind of thing. And actually we did have a question from one viewer who asks, how can you write an effective summary without making it appear to your employer that you're interested in leaving? That's a really good question, and I think what you can do, and we'll get to the summary details in a minute, is your summary should also always highlight your strengths, your skills. What are you working on, primarily in your practice? And so that's something that your current employer should not object to because it's what you're doing there. And then if you want to give a nod to something that you hope to be doing, that's a little more tricky. But using those keywords about that other interest could be maybe further down in your summary, but yes, it is something you should keep in mind when you're creating a summary. So back to the original questions, yes, you should include a bio or what LinkedIn calls a summary on your page. It can be just a couple of lines. We're going to show you some examples, but it just tells a little bit more about you. And again, if somebody's searching through LinkedIn to find an intellectual property lawyer, for example, it'd be good to have that in that summary page. How detailed should your profile be? We're going to get into that, but I think you should be thinking through, making clear and concise choices about how to write about things. You don't want it to be pages and pages long. We talked about skills. We are going to talk towards the end of the program about privacy and the tools, the LinkedIn tools where you can control what people see. So we're going to get to the question about updating without people seeing what you're doing. And then also we'll be talking about, descriptions for so search firms can find you as they have openings. Next slide. So these are the components of the LinkedIn profile. There's a photo, there's something called a heading, then as we said, the summary, experience, which is descriptions of your jobs, your education, and your interests. So some of this can mirror your resume, but I would argue that you don't just duplicate your resume and you don't want the experience section or the job descriptions to be as detailed as the resume is. Next slide. So I like to use this example so that you can see a real-life profile. This is my friend Andreas Baltatsis. And first of all, let's talk about his photo. I think it's great. It's very professional. As you'll see, LinkedIn now uses kind of a smaller photo than they did before. So it's, head and shoulders. He's got a suit on. He's looking straight ahead at you. And that's the kind of photo you want. Professional, welcoming in. Some lawyers like to have a more serious look. Whatever, that's fine, whatever you, and not smiling, it's whatever you think is best for your practice, but I think this is a great example. Then what Andreas has done is he's utilized this new feature of LinkedIn, which is the background page. I think, wait a minute, it's called, anyway, you can get on it by clicking Edit Background. And that's where you see Kramer Amato in the background. So you can have a picture there. You can have the logo from your company or whatever. It's just a visual to draw you into the page. Now, the next part of the, back to the other slide. The next part of the profile is the heading. And so after Andreas's name, here's where you see it's like his elevator speech or how he wants to, people to find him. He's intellectual property attorney, strategist, and advisor. So he's telling you what he does, what he wants people to know him for. And he's also a principal or a partner at Kramer Amato. But when you go further into his profile, you'll see this, but what he wants to hit you right away is this is an intellectual property attorney, so if you're looking for someone in his area, he's going to pop up. And then finally, under where it says View and Sales Navigator, you'll see the first couple lines of his summary, and again, I think he's made some good choices where it's good, strong description of what he does, and it's going to lead you, then you click further and you can see more of his summary. But I think he's done a really good job with his profile. Next slide. So here's my profile just to show you another example, and I've just chosen some art, whatever, artist rendering for my background. My logo is stairs, you're climbing the steps to success. So anyways, that's just what I've chosen. But here you'll see I do use my actual title for GW Law School because I think it explains what I do here at GW. And then for my business, I want everyone to know that I'm an attorney career coach. So again, that's my heading, not my title. So I've got a little mix there of what you can do. Okay, next slide. So let's get into a little more detail now about preparing a successful summary. And I think the first step, and this is so instructive, is to just look through LinkedIn and search for people who do what you do. So and who do what you would like to do. So look at their summaries. How did they describe themselves? Look at their experience. What jobs have they had along the way to get them where they want to be? And especially those of you listening in today who are law students, this can be so helpful. Look back to see, when did they graduate from law school, and what were the jobs they had that led to their current job, or even during law school? Just gives you an idea. Your career, it takes many paths and is not always just the first job out of law school is what you're going to do forever. So anyway, I think this can give you ideas of what you want to talk about and see what others describe. Then I recommend making a list of your skills. Think about your accomplishments. What have you done? What are your strengths? And have those in mind when you write the summary. So just like Andreas, you can have a good heading or a good start to, this is what I can really do well, and I want people to know, so they will hire me as an attorney. Either the client will hire you, or of course if you're looking for a job. What makes you unique? Know your audience and your goals. So that goes back a little bit to that question we had. So remembering that your current job and people who work there can also look at you, but you do want to present as a professional and with experiences that would be helpful, and also to kind of sell, if you will, what you're doing now. Use active verbs and keywords, and format for easy reading. So we don't want, again, maybe use bullets or whatever you want to really make your summary stand out. Next slide. And then this is just something I use when I do a presentation in person, and we sit and actually write summaries, and so that's great. And this is just a little bit of what we said, so then, maybe when you look back later, hopefully on these slides, if this is going to help you with your summary, come to this slide and it'll get you started for writing and thinking about, what should you include in your summary, what accomplishments make you most proud, and is it relevant to your career, and then find a place on LinkedIn to include it. And then another thing, and I think this is a great exercise, is to boil down your job function into a one-line description. And P.S., this can also, of course, double as your elevator speech. So when you meet people, you might say, I'm a patent attorney in China, and I'm here now in the U.S., going to law school, and etc. So, whatever it is, the strongest thing about you and your situation, you're going to start. Someone has asked, should the summary be in first person or third person? That's a personal choice. I've seen people, switching, gears, and it used to always be only one way. So that's really, there's no answer for that. And then someone else asked, how far back to go in experience? So if you're a little more senior, how far back should you go? I always think the rule of thumb is, what experiences pertain to where you are now, or really pertain to where you want to be? So I recently worked with someone in my business who had been at PwC way back when she first kind of got out of law school. And then in later years, she took on a very high-level job, in-house. But I counseled that it would be great to include the PwC because it just shows some of her training along the way. So there's no specific answer about how many years. It just depends, what are you trying to promote here, and does that job add value to where you're going in the future? Okay, next slide, please. We're going to show now some summary examples to give you a little bit clearer idea about what I'm talking about. So this particular person is an executive, so it's an in-house counsel, and this person really wants people to understand that they are, work in the complex transactions, commercial transactions area. So first of all, you'll see I've highlighted these things, which would be the key words, okay? So whatever you do when you're done with your writing of your summary and your whole and also your job descriptions, just take a fresh look at it and think, hey, the work I really want to do is more in this area, whatever it is, environment or whatever, and make sure that that word is used and repeated several times throughout. And certainly if you've had a job where you did a multitude of things and working on environmental matters was way down on the list, you can still list it because it was something you did. You, of course, wouldn't list it as if it was the only thing, and you're always going to be totally honest. So if you're then having an interview and they say, oh, I see 2 jobs ago you also worked in environmental, you're going to be totally honest and say, yes, it was maybe 10% of my work at that point, but I was so excited to do that work, and that's why, as you can see, as I got more senior, I've done more of it. So anyway, just a word about the use of keywords and and how to fit them in. The other thing I'd just like to say about this person's summary is I really like how she's got her, first sentence, which is just a general description of what she does, and then she breaks it out for you, and the second paragraph talks about her sector and industry experience, so she'll really get into a little more specifics. And again, if you're looking at this person, you can understand and see, oh, she's done work in aerospace, good, or whatever. So anyways, next slide, please. On the next slide, you'll now see an example of an attorney, and this is a fellow at a law firm, and so he's talking about his practice in civil law and, of course, the kinds of matters he handles. So again, throughout his profile, this will be repeated, so somebody looking for an attorney who does medical malpractice will find him, and that's his goal there. But the other thing I like about Seth here is that he also talks about his accomplishments. So he tells, he's on the National Trial Lawyers Association's Executive Committee and other accomplishments, explained in a very nice way, and it also, of course, underscores his prominence in the community and excellence in what he does. And then the other point I like to make and why I like to show this summary is the second bullet, where he takes the time now to talk about community service and what he's passionate about when he's not involved in practicing law. And this is just a nice thing to add. Again, it's super professional. We're not getting into anything that, again, would be Facebook-like, but, it just shows he gives back to the community. And if you were wanting to connect with him and you were really involved in education reform, this would be something that would be great to know. Okay, let's stop a minute. I'm going to just look and see if there's another question. Someone asked about transitioning to law as a new career. I think we'll take that question offline. Feel free to email me. But, basically we always have to figure out how to tie in what you've done before. So if you've had a lot of work or you have an education in finance and now you're, wanting to transition into being a lawyer at a firm or something, say, in the financial sector, that of course would be an easy way to make the tie. But yes, it can be a particular question. We'll table that for now. Okay, next slide. Tips on experience. So again, the experience section is where now, just like in your resume, you list your job title and organization. You're going to describe your work, again, using keywords. And again, you can lead with the work that you do that is the work that you like the best or hope to do more of in the future. So that could be the first bullet or the first part of a bullet. And then I would include at least 2 bullets for each job, but again, not necessary to go on too long, and then be sure to note your accomplishments. Next slide. Okay, and here's an example of experience and also the use of keywords. So this young woman, started out as an editor, but in the thread that kind of connects everything that she's done is that she's always worked on Dodd-Frank matters, and she's now landed in a great new job that's not listed there and also in that area. So it's just, she was very conscious of making sure to add that, and it happened to be what she worked on. So that's just an example of experience. Next slide. At the bottom of the LinkedIn profile is a section called Interests, and it used to be called Groups, so I think there are other things there which, as I mentioned at the beginning when I was talking about Coca-Cola, you can follow companies and follow people, and so that would also be listed there, and you'll see that I'm in these groups that are posted, but also I'm following some of these other groups. So these are mine, and there are more, but there is a way on LinkedIn, and we're going to get to the searching in just a minute, where you can search groups, and when you search groups, you'll be invited to put in a term. And so again, to follow on the prior example, if you were going to use finance, you would put, financial attorney, and now all the groups that have to do with financial attorney or finance are going to come up, and you can ask to join them. And once you join a group, there's different options, but you can then essentially blog with the members of the group. Sometimes they post jobs, etc. And sometimes you can just learn more and keep up with your industry this way. So it's a really good idea to do that. Let me just take another quick look at the questions. Okay, we'll table that next one as well to later. Next slide. Okay, so now we're moving on to networking, which of course is the purpose of LinkedIn, and how to post articles, photos, etc. What are some appropriate ways to reach out to contacts, and how best to use the alumni search function. So I'm going to be going into all of that. Let me just say a minute, stop a minute and talk about the appropriate ways to reach out to contacts. In my view, once you find a contact that you think, okay, this person could be helpful to me, what I like to do is then do a little more research on the person and find out their email, maybe at their law firm or maybe in government or whatever, and then email them, at their workplace. I think it's much more effective to email there. Not everybody uses LinkedIn all the time, and of course you can send InMail, which is their way of communicating through LinkedIn, and if it's somebody who's super active, that's totally great. But if you really, I think it's fine to email somebody in their workplace, and then they can respond accordingly. So I think that's the appropriate way to reach out. It depends on what and what stage of your career. When I'm counseling law school students, I suggest that when you reach out to somebody and saying, instead of saying, I'm interested in your law firm, are you hiring? I would recommend saying, I'm very impressed with the work you've done at your firm. I'd like to learn more. And would you be willing to connect with me for career advice? That way it opens the door to a real conversation instead of just a yes or no answer. So, we can talk more on this if people have questions, but I think that's hopefully helpful. And then turn to the next slide, please. We're going to be reviewing how to do searches and how to use the alumni search in just a moment. So first here, this is a search you can do, and this is how to post content. So we're stepping back a minute to the profile. So let's say you've done a lot of writing for your work, and you want to post something on LinkedIn. When I hit my home page, or just hit on my profile, this is what I see. And at the top, you can see they're really promoting this, and they want people to share articles and different things for what they call their news feed. So right there, you can click on write an article. You can then, and it'll instruct you to upload an article you've written, and you can post it. The other thing you can do is, if you come across an article that you think, hey, people in my industry would be very interested to see this article, you can also post that. And again, a similar way to do it. You post it and then you put a comment. Found this article about real estate, property in Florida or whatever, and then thought it would be interesting to share. Now all of your contacts will get that in their feed, and they'll then decide whether they want to read it or not, and they may or may not comment, but it's a way to engage and to share information. You can do the same with images. You go to a conference or something and you want to share, or an alumni event, you can post that there, and even a video. So there's just various things that you can post, and email me if you'd like to have more ideas about how to do it, or if it's not working for you. Okay, next slide. Okay, so now we're getting a little more into the search tool. So upper left, where it says in the box, I've put in housing. So right now we're searching for content. So as I used in my example, maybe I'm interested in real estate or housing or whatever. So I just put in the search tool housing. And then the most important thing about this slide is to look across the top, right after where it says housing, and you'll see all the different categories where you can search. What I use primarily, it'll be the people search, but now you can see we're on the content tab, and so this is where multiple people and companies and all kinds of people have posted content that you might want to read. So I'm searching content. I want to see what there is about, going on in the real estate area, and this comes up. So just wanted to quickly show you that function. Next slide. Okay, so now concentrating a little more on networking, and then we'll be getting to the searching for the networking as well. So with LinkedIn, you can search contacts. These are the different groups, as I said. We're going to talk about how to refine your search. You can create connections, and we'll talk about that, and then organizing your contacts and coming up with a plan. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about using the search tool for networking itself. So I'm starting with something, kind of simple. Let's say I want to find a finance attorney. So going back and, when you first open up LinkedIn, it'll say that, and I'll put in finance attorney. And then the next thing it comes up is this menu again, and I'm choosing people. So after I put finance attorney and people and no other parameters, for some reason it came up with 87 results. I got to think there's a lot more, but this is where somewhere in their profile it said finance and attorney, and anyway, so the search was 87 results. And then you'll see that this is someone who came up, and they're a second level contact. So let me just say a word before I move on to this, which is I was actually meeting with a student one time. She was from China, and she wanted to find out about the market and working in New York City. And as we were talking, I said, you know what, let's put in the name of your undergraduate institution in China and see what happens. So we put that name in there, and then as you'll see in the next slide when we get there, you can filter by location, and lo and behold, we found an attorney who is practicing law in New York who had gone to this student's undergrad institution in China, and she connected with that person who was so excited to meet her and talk and help her. So you just never know what you're going to find, and something like that where it's just so interesting that they both went to the same college and they both came to the U.S. and it was a great connection. So those are the kinds of things we're trying to create. Next slide. We'll show you a little more. So going back to our example, what comes up after you then enter the finance attorney and everything is on the far right you're going to get this great pull down. And from this, you can do a further search. So I clicked First Connections. I only want people who I was connected to for this search. I can also click Location if I want to. I didn't, but that's way you could sort by your city. And then I also clicked School for schools, and I entered the George Washington University Law School. Now I have my list. And 5 results came up for the people who I'm connected to in the first degree, and then and if I unclick that, there were many, many more results because George Washington University Law School, people in the finance industry. But anyway, it's very cool, and these are ways you can fine-tune. And with any database, you know, sometimes you'll get a result and it'll be a little bit off the mark. So it's not, you know, 100% accurate, but it really does give you a good idea. The other thing I really like LinkedIn for is it just gives you an idea about what people do when they have this kind of background. So as you'll see, Evan Sheets is at a small firm, and I believe he used to be at the SEC. The next guy is also at a firm. He's in Boston at a firm, but you know, in a longer list, you might see people in government or in a small business or whatever, and it just gives you really a cool idea about all the different opportunities there are. Next slide. So as I said, the people that I identified in the prior slide were my first level connections, and just a quick word about that. So if I invite one of you to connect with me, then you would be my first connection. And so my friend Mark Weller here is a good example. And so when I just search his name, or if he comes up in a search that I do about his industry, I'll be reminded, oh yeah, Mark, and it's great, and I, you know, hadn't thought of him in that context and whatever, and we can network. So that's the first level connection. Once Mark and I are connected, all of his connections are now my second level connections. So that is super helpful, because if I do a search and a second level connection comes up, that's somebody I don't know personally, I can now reach out to Mark and say, you know, dear Mark, either by email or phone or however you want to, you know, I'd really like to meet Joe Schmo, and I see that Joe and I are both connected to you. Would you please introduce us? So that's just a wonderful thing that, and a use for LinkedIn. And if I were to scroll further down on Mark's profile, you would see how we are connected, and that's what you oh, I see, I'm sorry, it does. It says one mutual connection. So you can see who I'm connected to through Mark, but that's, anyway, the power of LinkedIn and how it works. Then there are also third level connections, which are a little bit more tenuous, because a third level connection is a connection of Mark's second level connection. And so that may or may not be useful, and it's kind of harder to get to because you have to go through more hoops. But again, depends on what you're looking for. It could be super helpful. Okay, someone asked, I'm going to stop just for a minute, and said, how do you find email if you don't have premium version? Okay, so you will just have to Google the person. So for instance, if you were looking for Mark Weller and you see his company, you could Google Mark, the name of the company, and email, maybe it comes up. And then if it doesn't, of course, you've just got to call the company and say, I'm trying to reach your assistant General Counsel, Mark Weller, and then hopefully you can connect that way. And then also sometimes in the government it's hard to find someone. So, you know, if Google doesn't work and if LinkedIn only, you know, won't tell you that connection, you know, you'll just have to try other things. If they're an alum and so are you, maybe you can go to your alumni directory. But, you know, as I said, that's one thing that is a benefit of doing a premium. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, and so this is just about, you know, kind of getting started. So how do you build your network of connections? And what I recommend you do is whatever format you have, if you have Outlook or anything, where your connections are listed, you can go to LinkedIn, and then where it says connections, add connections, you know, it will allow you to upload your contacts list. And there is a way to to say, I only want to add these people, and you check those boxes. So unless you want to have your entire list of contacts get an invitation to LinkedIn, I advise taking that step. So that's great. You'll have your contacts listed. You can then think through, I don't know if they're on my contacts, but I want to include all my colleagues at work or whatever. So your colleagues at work, your past employers, your law school, etc., you can also add them, but you don't necessarily need to, because once you have a profile and you've listed that institution, they will automatically be linked in with you. And then the other thing is, when you meet people at networking events, you can invite them to link in. Next slide. So this is a little bit more about connecting with people, as you meet them at networking events, etc. You can just say LinkedIn, and LinkedIn will just send an automatic message that says, I'd like you to link in, or let's link in. But you can personalize those messages, and if you're just doing them one-on-one or following up with somebody that you just met, of course that's a nice touch. So it was so great to meet you last night at the ABA, meeting. I would like to, let's link in, or I'd invite you to link in, something like that. And then they get a little more personalized information, because they'll get an email, and then they click on it, linking in. There's something else. I have to confess, I haven't used this, but if you're a super techie person and you want to, there are many card reading apps out, and if you can click on this link either now or later when you get the final materials for this program, it'll bring you to like a whole list of different apps you can use actually at the event that can read a business card and enter it into your LinkedIn. And it's usually recommended that you connect with people within 24 to 48 hours. Like everything else, it's not really a hard and fast rule, and I've, been very successful in connecting with people at a later date. But of course, the fresher it is, the better, because if you just met them last night, hopefully they will remember you. Okay, next slide. So these are just some thoughts about growing your online presence. So one way to do it is to post status updates. So this is not like on Facebook where it's like, Katie White is at the airport, but more substantive. So I'm attending a conference. I wanted to share this attached report because I think it is really useful for our industry, things like that. And especially if you're in this for business development, or you have your own business and you're trying to grow your clientele, thoughtful posts can be really helpful, and when people log in, that's the first thing they see on their profile. So, posting is a good idea. You can connect your connections using LinkedIn, which is also wonderful. Hey, I really thought the two of you should meet, and because you're both in the same industry or whatever. The sharing contact we talked about. And as you may notice, if you are on LinkedIn, they will send you emails to say, the following people have recently had, anniversaries or birthdays or whatever. And I think it's a great thing if you scroll that list and we'll send an email and say, hey, congratulations on, working at your firm for, a year or whatever. So it's just different ways that you can kind of be conscious of that. Let me go now and look just a minute back at some of the questions and see if there's something. Someone asked this. How do you deal with random people adding you on LinkedIn? Actually, nobody can add you. You have to accept. So if somebody sends you an invitation to link in, I would be thoughtful about it and say, hey, is there any reason for us to do this? Could this be future business? Is this somebody I want to know? Because of what I do as a consultant and also at GW, like if somebody's connected to GW Law School, I just automatically link in because I'm happy to connect. But some people are very private about what they want. So you can always decline an invitation, and the person who sent it will never know. They'll just think it's still out there in the atmosphere somewhere. So don't worry about that. You do not have to link in, and I do get these too, some random people that have nothing to do with my industry or whatever, and so I just decline so it won't be cluttering up my inbox. But yes, you can. Should you connect with people you do not know and have never met? That's up to you. Again, if there is some reason for the connection and some benefit that you see, you can, and if not, I wouldn't do it. So yeah, okay, I think we're caught up to the questions. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is a very important part, and we always get a lot of people interested in this, and how can I control, my own LinkedIn profile. So to operate the controls, you go on the far right when you're in LinkedIn, on the far right of the toolbar, and you'll see this little picture of yourself. And if you click on that picture, what comes down, and you look on the far right of this slide, is a pull-down menu. And you will then can click on Settings and Privacy, and that's what I did to get to this slide that you see. And then instead of choosing Account on the left, I chose Privacy, and I chose Profile Privacy. So now you can go in and edit these various areas. So edit your public profile. So again, this just depends on what you do and how public you want to be. You can change your profile so it says very little, or again, in my case, I want people to know about my business, so I have a pretty full public profile. You can manage your status to show if you're active or not. You can manage who can see your connections. This has nothing to do with the first, second, third level that you see always in LinkedIn, but more who can see your entire list of contacts. So for me, I have that shut off because I don't see why somebody should need to see my full list. I'm happy to share them through the regular way, but anyway, etc. So, and then there are just various things that you can do with these settings. I think, and then if you go to the next slide, I can show some more. Right, what others see when you have viewed their profile. So again, we're in the same area, scrolling down more, and here's what people will see. So if I'm looking at your profile, this is what you see about me. It's the whole Megillah. The reason that I keep it like that, in addition to what I said earlier, is I'll give a little story. I was working with a student, and the student wanted to work in California, specifically Southern California, in litigation, and we were looking for small to medium law firms for him. So I did a search, and lo and behold, I found an alum. I probably put in litigation and then Los Angeles area, and then GW Law School. I found an alum at a small firm in Santa Monica. And I talked to the student and said, maybe you could try to connect with this person. Later that day, I got an email from that alum through LinkedIn who said, I saw that you were looking at my profile. I've been meaning to contact you. We have an opening for a summer associate job, and I've been wanting to hire a GW Law student. So it was great. It was like a win-win, and someone who was very savvy about LinkedIn contacted me. So to me, it's fine. But you can change your privacy mode so that people don't see who's looking at their profile. And so if you want to do that, no problem. And those are the different levels, as you'll see. Somebody from my alma mater, or it would just say anonymous LinkedIn member. So you can control that. And then there's another thing you can control, which is when you are making changes to LinkedIn, like just saying making updates or whatever, you can hide that so people would not see that while you're making the changes, and then unhide your profile so that people can see it again. So you can, if you want to, while you're making your changes to the profile. Let's see, we're getting towards the hour. I just want to be sure that we get let's see. Yeah, I got a couple questions about the next slide, so that's always rewarding. So next slide. So this next slide is about, actually 2 slides now, but we're starting here. This is fine. This I just like to throw in there, and again, it just depends. This might be more for a junior person, but I always think it's great to track your outreach. So the main purpose of this whole slide is I contacted this woman, this is when we met, this is when I followed up, then when the next meeting was going to be, but keeping notes about your conversation for yourself, and this is something you have to do in a separate database or a Excel spreadsheet or however you want to, but it is so useful, and when you remember to circle back with the person. So not only like right after I met with Mary Hurry, thanks so much, you were so helpful, but a month or 2 down the road, then circling back with Mary and saying, Mary, I contacted the 3 people you referred me to. I was able to talk to June and Herb. They were so helpful, and now I'm talking to other people and I got a new job, or I'm still looking or whatever. Mary is going to really appreciate that you took her advice and you moved on, and it also gives you another touch point, so maybe Mary will help you in the future. So I just always like to mention that. So now let's move to the jobs page, and several of you, sorry, next slide. Yeah. Several of you have been asking about this question, and it's been posted on, etc., for job seeking. So there is a way now to click and let recruiters know you're open to opportunities. So again, we're in the settings area, we're in privacy, and we went down to job seeking, as you'll see. So if you want people to know you're searching, the recruiters, you can click on that setting. However, there have been some articles and some back and forth lately that if your employer also has their recruiters trolling LinkedIn for potential applicants, they may come across your profile and see that you're seeking. So I would just caution you to take maybe a minute, Google this, and see what the latest is. I know that LinkedIn is aware of it. I do not know if they have come up with a way of fixing it. So if you really want to be more cautious, I wouldn't maybe put that enable that option, but by using keywords and keeping your profile up to date and maybe posting, hopefully you'll still become, you'll still be picked up by recruiters, because this is not the only way that they find people. They have very elaborate search tools, as many of you I'm sure know, and can use LinkedIn to find people in industries and things that they are looking for. So several of you have asked about that, and I think that, just take care, especially if you don't want people to know that you're looking. Okay, let's now look at the last page, and then we'll see if we have more questions, which deals with social media ethics guidelines. And I just like to mention this, really each of you should check your own local bar rules to see what you can and cannot, if it addresses social media, and what can and cannot be said because you're attorneys on LinkedIn. There used to be a category for specialties, and I think in a lot of jurisdictions you weren't supposed to hold yourself out to be an expert or a specialist. So at any rate, I've just provided here a link to the New York State Bar Association rules that recently came out in May, just because it's kind of informative on this area. I would not be afraid of using LinkedIn. You can list your skills, etc., but it's probably prudent to just see if there's something that your bar association says that you should look out for. Okay, let me just see if we have any other questions. We didn't get to. Someone said, can you review again if it's worth it to pay for an upgrade? And again, this just depends on, maybe you're doing a job search. Maybe you want the upgrade for the next couple of months and then, stop payment or, decide not to. And it's just up to you for how much you're going to use it. Yeah, I think this is good. It's just been such a pleasure to talk to all of you today. I really hope that you'll email me. You have all my information, you know, I'd be so happy to correspond with you about your specific questions. Looking at summaries and helping people write profiles is something I'm also happy to do. And so thanks so much. I'm going to turn it back over now to Tracy.
Yeah, thank you, Katie, for sharing, such great tips for updating our profiles on LinkedIn, to better help us network and search for jobs. And thank you all for attending today's webinar. Attendees, be sure to check out our website for free career-related articles and webinars. There's a bunch of recordings on the website right now. And on your screen, you'll see our next webinar that's coming up in the Career Advice Series. You can also search for jobs at ambar.org/jobs and connect with us on a number of social media channels. And you can learn more about our board on our About page. Before leaving, though, please be sure to check out our short survey. Thank you again and have a great day.